What's up, everybody? Coach Mills here, and in all my VOD reviews analyzing people play the game and try to get better, there are 8 abilities that in general people are using incorrectly again and again. That being said, let's break down these top 8 abilities and tell you exactly what you should be doing in your games to have more value. And don't worry, we're going to be including abilities for DPS, tanks, and support, so something for everybody. Now, kicking it off with the first ability on the list, and surprise, surprise, it's actually not one ability but 2, but they're very similar in the way they should be used, and it's Mei's Cryo and Reaper's Wraith. Now, the thing about these abilities is, yes, they can be used to get yourself out of sticky situations, which is what most people use of them, which is why a lot of people aren't really tapping into the potential of not only this ability, but both of these characters as a whole. You see, yes, you can get out of danger with Reaper Wraith, yes, you can try to heal up and get out of danger with Cryo, but a lot of times, this is not really the way to get the most aggressive value, and let me explain. Using these abilities instead to basically give you temporary immunity to go in for another play or go in more aggressively is the best, because think about the time to kill on these heroes. Mei's time to kill is effectively how long it takes her to freeze a target, and Reaper just has so much burst damage that his time to kill is almost instantaneous if you can dodge the enemy CC. Imagine this example. Whether you're Mei or Reaper, you walk up to a McCree, right? What does that McCree want to do? He wants to flash you. Now, if you start to freeze him as Mei, instantly go into your Cryo, he throws his flashbang, hits nothing, you could just stay in your Cryo, the McCree could run away, and no one died, no one did anything, that's fine. But what if you pop right out of that Cryo and start freezing that McCree? Now, because that McCree can't, of course, he can't stun you anymore because you already used it, and you, as Mei, should be crouching like crazy. Crouch left and right, make sure that you're bobbing and weaving so the McCree doesn't hit headshots on you. Also, because you don't have to hit him perfectly in order to freeze him, then once he's frozen, you can stop moving, headshot him, you win the matchup just like that. All you had to do is blink in and out of your Cryo. Now, Reaper's Fade could be very similar, where you go onto a McCree, you put as much pressure as you possibly can on this McCree. When he's at 100 health, he's like, oh crap, I gotta flash this guy. He tries to flash you, you wraith out, you wraith back in, and you just instantly kill him. The thing is, being able to use these abilities in this aggressive way can get you tons of picks. You're going to be able to win tons of matchups. All you got to think about is baiting out that cooldown, whether it's Roadhog Hook, McCree Stun, Sleep Dart, whatever the case may be, popping right out and then finishing off the enemy, because they don't have that one ability that they need to stop you, and then you're right in your effective range, which is up close on both Mei and Reaper. Now, moving on to the next ability that you're using wrong in your games, and it's Genji's Reflect. And a lot of people are like, okay, this one seems pretty obvious, but there are some things you're doing wrong with Reflect. The first thing that you're doing with Reflect is you're just walking up into the center of choke, and you're just reflecting, right? That's all you're doing. You're walking up into choke, you're doing some damage, and you're reflecting. But guess what? No one's going to fire at you. What you need to be doing with Reflect if you want to do frontline damage and build frontline ult charge is go in with Reflect by surprise. You can drop in from the top and reflect. You can drop in from the side out of nowhere and reflect, but you don't even really want enemies to see you as a person until, of course, you are already there reflecting, because they're going to be trying to focus down your tank or whatever. This is going to work even better if one of your players or one of your teammates are like Anti or something like that. They're going to take a lot of focus fire, and you can sneak in and get that reflect off. Another thing you need to be doing is you need to be thinking about what abilities you could specifically reflect to get a whole bunch of ult charge. The 2 biggest ones is 1, Fire Strike, and 2, of course, Moral Orb. If you could reflect these abilities consistently, you're going to be able to build up really fat blades, and that is one of the best things that you could be doing. And then, of course, the last way is just going in really aggressively and using Reflect as you retreat. And, of course, if you reflect like a headshot or something, then you can, instead of retreating, go back in and try to get more value. But all in all, these are the 3 things that you need to be thinking about when trying to use Reflect to get more value. Now, the next ability we got to talk about is kind of a weird one. It's Rein's Shield. And you might be asking, what the heck, Rein's Shield? We're including this in the ability category. Well, yes, we are, and a lot of people are using it incorrectly. The biggest problem with people using Rein's Shield in general is they're tanking far too much damage to walk up to a choke or to engage the enemy. Let me give you an example. Imagine instead of walking all the way from your spawn to the enemy, you walk with your shield out. Yes, it would be hypothetically impossible for someone behind your shield to get shot or naded or whatever, but the thing is, your shield by the time you get there there is already going to be destroyed. You're going to be moving into the fight absolutely at a snail's pace, and once you're in the front of the fight, you're not going to have a shield. You're going to be there so slow, and there's nothing you could do. You're basically just going to be a giant meat shield for the enemy team's focus fire and abilities. Now, what you should be doing instead is routing around natural cover and stagger stepping, shield, dropping your shield, pushing forward. You do this back and forth because hypothetically, you want to just use as little shield as possible, and then once you're on the front line with your DPS and supports right behind you, that is when you put up your full shield in front of the enemy. Now your team have a form of cover that they get to hide behind while at the same time do damage through, and you still got them into the fight. Now, of course, finding that balance is the tricky part, finding the balance between shielding up and pushing forward without the shield, but the thing that you really need to keep in mind is as long as you have your shield for the front line and blocking these really key cooldowns like nade and things like that, then you are doing your job. But if you get to the front line and you don't have shields, then you have no business being there, and you didn't honestly route correctly or manage your shield correctly, and essentially you're not doing your job as a main tank. Now, moving on to the next ability we got to talk about, and this is Ana's Nade. And this is one that a lot of Anas, specifically at the low ranks, get wrong, and even higher ranked Anas can get wrong as well. You see, Ana Nade is one of the most oppressive and powerful aggressive abilities in the entire game, but a lot of Anas are just wasting it on really marginal situations for really marginal effects. For example, if you put yourself in a bad position and get caught out by a ton of damage and have to self-nade, that is one of the worst mistakes you possibly could be doing on Ana, because if instead of having to nade yourself for that 50 damage, right, you instead go and set up a scenario where you get a 2-man, 3-man, 4-man nade, what does that nade transfer to? That nade transfers into an entire team fight one, and that's why a lot of players really focus instead on nading themselves or naming their teammates when they're panicking and missing their shots. But Ana Nade in particular has the highest ceiling of impact and one of the lowest floors of impact as far as an ability is concerned. Like, the distance between the ceiling and the floor is astronomical. Think about a Roadhog hook. What's the floor? You miss a hook and get no value. What's the ceiling? You get a hook and maybe cancel an ultimate or whatever and you get a lot of value. Now, what's the floor on Ana's Nade? You heal like 10 HP. What's the ceiling? You win an entire team fight because you nade the enemy team. And that is why it's so important to be, instead of always healing yourself, try to position correctly to where you can set up these nades, and also try to never ever use it on yourself. If you can help it, the only time you should be using it on yourself is if you absolutely have to, or like an enemy Genji is literally diving you. Of course you could use it then. But for all other scenarios, you should really be trying to use this ability aggressively. Now, moving on to the next ability that people are using incorrectly over and over again, and it's Lucio's Amp It Up. You see, Amp It Up is one of those abilities that seems like pretty intuitive, right? I'm just going to amp it up. We need heals, amp up heals. We need speed, amp up speed, whatever. The biggest problem is when people are amping up and what people are amping up specifically, whether it be health or speed. You see, pro players almost never, and I mean never, amp up more than 50% of the amp heal. They will do at most 50% heal, 50% speed, where they switch it midway during the amp up, or they will just not heal at all. And the reason that they do this is because speed is effective health, it's effective damage, it can be effective positioning. Getting your teammates somewhere quicker can be way better than healing your teammates for a little bit of damage. Because imagine you're trying to go from point A to point B, but the entire route you're going to be taking about 50 damage per second, and it's going to take you 3 seconds. Now, if instead you could down that to 2 seconds, that's a whole 50 damage less. Sure, you could heal them up, but the ally is going to be able to get there in quicker time. You can heal them after they get behind natural cover, and your ally could potentially set up an aggressive play. Enemies are probably not going to be able to do as much damage also because your target is moving quicker. There's just so many benefits to moving quickly, and you need to be really thinking about that. Another thing is, if you are ever at a choke, Hanamura choke, Iconwall choke, whatever, you should be speeding up out of the choke, not out of the spawn. And this is a big problem that happens where, let me take Hanamura for example, right? A Lucio will speed his team out of spawn, which seems like a great idea. They'll get to choke, and what your team should realistically do, right, is wait until your speed amp comes back online and you speed into point. But what does your team actually do? Oh, they poke at the choke, one of them gets picked off, and you never got an opportunity to set up your speed or rush onto point. Now, if instead you would have waited to use your speed, routed to the choke, amp up and speed in when you get to the choke, that can be a way that you play around your teammates' mistakes. Of course, at a high level, in pro play, in scrims, or whatever, you're going to be able to set this up coordinated, but in ranked play, you need to be thinking about what you're specifically doing and how it will affect your team, and amping up at a spawn, speeding at a spawn can be a way that you realistically throw because one of your teammates feed. I know it's not your fault, but it can start a cascade effect of feeding just because they got to that choke a little bit quicker, and then they're going to be like poking at the choke and then they die. Now moving on to the next ability we got to talk about, and this one is Sonic Arrow. And Sonic Arrow is one of those really, really powerful abilities if you use it correctly, but some people are not, and let me explain what I mean. The first thing that players are doing is they're using their Sonic Arrow right off the bat on a flank. So they will Sonic Arrow on a flank, they're at an off angle, they'll Sonic Arrow, and then they'll try to kill the enemy from that flank. The thing is, when you are firing at an enemy and they don't know you're there, those shots are really easy. If the enemy is strafing left and right, but they're not looking at you, they're looking at a 90-degree angle, like at your team, and you're at their 90-degree angle, that's going to be really easy shots for you. But the second you throw out that recon arrow to find out where they are, they're going to be turning, and now they're going to be juking you, making the shot way more difficult. Now, yes, I'm not saying that Sonic Arrowing is bad by any means, but I am saying that if the enemy doesn't know where you are, you should not be leading off with a Sonic Arrow, and you should instead be leading off with shots that are targeted to kill the enemy, and then you use your Sonic Arrow to prevent enemies from pushing you or chasing you after they discover you on the flank or in the off angle, because you can control that space. Enemies kind of come through and chase you. That is the way that you can one-shot them and win that matchup. Another thing that you should be doing a lot is setting up vertical Sonic Arrows, where all you have to do is look up and tap the Sonic Arrow. It will come back down, but it will take quite a bit of time. You set these up so that you get to keep your Sonic Arrow, and you can set up a flank where it will touch ground. You'll get information about them, but you still have that other Sonic Arrow in your back pocket off cooldown already so that you can use it to prevent them from pushing you or chasing you after you try to go for a play, getting some kills. Now, moving on to the next ability we got to talk about, we're revisiting a Rein ability because this is another one that people are getting incorrectly, and it's Fire Strike. You see, Fire Strike is one of Rein's most important abilities because it builds him ult charge, but it can be one that really, really backfires on you. The first thing that you need to understand is that if there's a Genji on an enemy team, you need to assume that he's going to reflect your Fire Strike. I don't know if you've ever gone against a Smurf Genji before, but if their Rein Fire Strikes your team and he reflects your Fire Strike and dashes into your team and combos, he's going to kill your entire team. It's going to happen, I guarantee it. So you really need to be watching that Genji and waiting for that Genji to use his Reflect. Now, once that Genji uses his Reflect, you do got to remember that your Fire Strike will be off cooldown faster than he'll get his Reflect back, because his cooldown is a little bit longer than yours, so you're going to be able to get more off if you already see it, so you don't have to be afraid of him doing it again, and sometimes you can get you and him off sync, which is going to be better for you, as long as you don't get any Fire Strikes reflected. The next thing you need to think about is when the enemy Rein, you think he has Shatter, you cannot Fire Strike in front of him. He will shatter you into oblivion. Now, maybe at your rank right now, Reins aren't doing that to you, but I promise you, once you get to a certain level, you will be able to either roll Reins that you see Fire Striking when you have Shatter, or you're going to start getting shattered like crazy if you Fire Strike in front of a Rein. It's one of those things that is going to punish you every single time, and you might be thinking, okay, this is a pretty obvious tip, but I guarantee you that you are making this mistake if you are lower than Diamond. It's a very common mistake, and it's something that you need to be thinking about every single time in the Rein 1v1 matchup. Now, moving on to the last ability that you're using incorrectly, last but certainly not least, and it's Zarya Bubbles. And you might be asking, okay, how in the world am I using Zarya's Bubbles incorrectly? Well, if you're trying to coordinate it with another tank, or your main tank, or your Roadhog in this meta, or whatever the case may be, the best thing that you could be doing on Zarya, of course, is calming, right? You're calming to your teammates, you're saying, hey, you can go take damage, I'll bail you out, and you use your bubble to build charge that way. Now, in general with Zarya Bubbles, how you should be using your self bubble, that is the most important thing, and typically, Zarya, her whole playstyle should be going in waves. So, for example, you build up that ult charge, right? You have your tank go in, you bubble him, you go in a little bit, you bubble, you get that ult charge, and then, when you have a bubble, you want to be going in aggressively on whatever front line, and then when you notice the enemy are going to start dealing damage back to you, you can bubble the ending of your entrance and part of your exit at the same time. What I mean by this is your self bubble is almost like being used based on your aggression or your retretion. And this is one of the best reasons why Azari with max energy can legit spawn camp people. You can spawn camp, you could duel any DPS in the game, because all you have to do is start putting pressure on them when they realize that you're there, and it's obvious that they're about to like hit you with a sleep or clap back with some sort of ability. That is when you invest bubble to finish them off or to retreat. Either way, going in based on your engagements and using your bubbles based on engagements is the best way to be using Zarya. And of course, with your team, make sure you're calming on Zarya. It's just going to make things way better for you. Or better yet, duoing. But speaking of better yet, thank you so much for coming by. I'm Coach Mills, and of course, see you next time.